1209 between the Portuguese and a sultanate, very famous sultanate in what is in our present day Singapore, Malaysia and Singapore. A sultanate that used to be called Malacca. And from where comes the name of the Strait of Malacca, between Indonesia, the island of Sumatra, and Malaysia and Singapore. And where, currently speaking, 40% of the international trade passes through this strait, Malacca Strait, which is very close to Aceh, actually. If somebody ever heard about Aceh in Indonesia, it is very close to Indonesia. What I'm saying is that it's true. Ignorance is the worst enemy of all humankind, a human being. And we should do our best to be better known by each other. Living among you in America gave me many reasons to think that these misunderstandings, accumulation of misunderstandings actually, vis-à-vis many nations in the world, should be ended. But to be ended, we have to have such dialogues from time to time to explain ourselves and to dissipate any misconception and misinterpretation. Syria, historically speaking, gave to the Roman Empire 4 emperors. 4 Roman emperors came from Syria. One of them was a woman. One of these 4 emperors was a woman. At the same time, the first rebellion against the Roman Empire came from Syria also, from Palmyra, a Syrian princess named Zenobi. She was a woman also, and she undertook the first armed rebellion against the Roman Empire because of injustice inflicted to her people at that time. That happened something around 200 years after Jesus, AC, AD. Syria is the land of 33 civilizations. This is why the archaeologists, every time they dig in our land, they find out something astonishing. This is why we still don't have any subway in Damascus, because we cannot dig. If we do it, we will hit civilizations underground. We are very rich in history. Ambassador Ahmad Kamal is right when he says that, currently speaking, Syria may have the size of one of the United States, one of these 51 states. But we are proud of what we are. We are proud of what we are, and that may be the key of understanding the Syrian mentality. We have been treated unjustly by the European colonialist powers, namely speaking, France and Britain. And the paradox is that at the Conference of Paris on 1919, the Syrian representative at this conference, who used to be someone named Prince Faisal. Prince Faisal, at that conference, when he got the picture from the Russian at that time, that the British and the French were conspiring against the Middle East in order to divide it into protectorate, and that Syria would go to the French mandate, and Iraq to the British, plus Egypt, and then Palestine at that time, they agreed together, the French and the British, to put it under international control. Actually, Jerusalem at that time, they agreed to put it under international control, but Palestine should go to the British rule. When the Syrian representative at that conference understood what was going on between the French and the British, he asked to put Syria under an American mandate. And I am sure none of you knows this fact. He talked to President Wilson, who was present at that conference, and asked him to save Syria by putting Syria rather under an American mandate and not under a French or British mandate. He did it because at that time President Wilson was very famous for issuing his 14 principles talking about the right of people to self-determination. And at that time, the Syrian diplomacy, at a very early stage, discovered the importance of having good relationship with the United States. At a time when the American diplomacy also was not involved in any international war. At a time when the US diplomacy was not encouraging any hegemonic or expansionist politics all over the world. At a time where the US was out of being involved in regional conflicts. Vietnam came later on. The Second World War came later on. So from that moment of the history, Syria tried to approach the United States with an open mind. We tried even to bring USA into the Middle East politics. But of course, you all know that the what we call the isolation tendency of the American diplomacy at that time was very strong, and that the American administration decided for some decades to keep USA away from international turbulences. And they were right. They were right. The misunderstanding between the Arabs in general, and then the Muslims also, on one side, and United States and the West started with the Palestinian question and the establishment of Israel in Palestine. This is where the conflict of interest started. And it grew up until we hit some degree of misunderstanding that we are trying on both sides now to reduce a little bit, gradually speaking. What we need actually, currently speaking, is stability, genuine peace, not any kind of peace, genuine peace that should be just and based on international law. And that means establishing a Palestinian state in West Bank and Gaza with the borders of 67, and restituting the Syrian Golan to Syria, and having peace treaties between Israel and its neighbors. That could be achieved. This is achievable. This is achievable. And the only way to achieve this very noble objective and goal is by convincing politicians, especially within the American administration, that the American